It's easy to romanticize solitude, to imagine peaceful mornings, the sound of birds outside the window, a cup of tea with your favorite book. And sometimes, that's exactly what it is. But if we're honest, truly honest, living alone after 65 comes with fears no one really wants to talk about. Not in family gatherings, not in doctor's offices, not even with close friends. Because these fears are quiet, and they often come in the middle of the night, when the house creaks a little too loudly, or the phone doesn't ring for days, or you forget why you walked into the kitchen. Here's what no one tells you. It's not just about loneliness. It's about being unnoticed. The fear of falling and no one knowing. The fear of getting sick and not being found in time. The fear of quietly fading from people's lives until you're just that elderly neighbor who keeps to herself. It's the fear of silence turning from peaceful to empty. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe but whispers, "You're all alone in this." And then there's the fear of forgetting. Not just names or appointments, but forgetting how to be with yourself without needing constant noise or distraction. No one prepares you for that, because we live in a world that tells us we must always be surrounded. That being alone means being abandoned. That solitude at this age is dangerous, or worse, pitiful. And sometimes we believe it. We question our choices. We wonder, did I make a mistake choosing to live this way? But here's the truth I've come to see. The danger isn't always in the solitude itself. The danger is in the fear that makes us forget how strong we actually are. Yes, the risks are real. Yes, living alone after 65 comes with challenges. But the answer isn't to run from solitude, it's to understand it, to name the fears, to prepare for them wisely, and to discover slowly, gently, that some of those fears are actually doors to a kind of freedom we never had before. When people talk about the risks of growing old alone, they talk about falling in the shower, missing medications, forgetting the stove. And yes, those are very real concerns. I've had my share of close calls and I've taken precautions. But over time, I've come to believe something far more dangerous than any physical fall is the slow, quiet fall into someone you no longer recognize. You see, before I lived alone, I lived with others, sometimes with family, sometimes with housemates, sometimes in homes where I had a place but not a voice. I had to adapt to the needs, the moods, the preferences of those around me, what to eat, when to talk, what time to go to bed, even how loud to laugh, how much space to take up. And I did it, willingly, lovingly, as many of us do. Because we're taught that being agreeable means being loved. But little by little, I became softer in ways that didn't feel kind. I became quieter in ways that didn't feel peaceful. I became smaller, not because age demanded it, but because my environment did. It wasn't until I began living alone, truly alone, that I realized how much of myself I had put into storage. And for a while, that scared me. Not the solitude, but the rediscovery. Who was I when no one else was around to define me? What music did I actually like? Did I even like the TV shows I used to watch? Or were they just background noise in a busy home? What was my pace, my rhythm, my flavor of peace? It took time, and it wasn't always easy. But slowly I began to remember myself, and the strangest thing happened. The fear of being alone began to fade. Because I wasn't truly alone, I had returned to myself. So yes, we must be mindful of the physical dangers of aging alone. We should prepare, take precautions, and stay connected. But don't forget this. You can fall while surrounded by people, if you lose your sense of self, and you can rise again, even in solitude, if you begin to listen to your own voice. Living alone after 65 isn't just about avoiding harm, it's about reclaiming identity. And in many ways, that's the safest, most powerful thing you can do. There's something quietly revolutionary about living alone after 65. Not in grand gestures, not in changing the world, but in the tiny, personal, unapologetic freedoms. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I began to ask myself, what do I want to do today? And the answers surprised me. I wanted to eat breakfast at 10 a.m., not 7, not on someone else's schedule. But when my body was ready, when the sun had warmed the floor, when I felt hunger gently, not from habit. I wanted to leave dishes in the sink sometimes, without guilt, to listen to music from the 70s and dance a little in the kitchen, to read poetry out loud with no one watching, to take a nap at 3 p.m., to drink tea at midnight if that's when my thoughts felt alive. I started wearing the clothes I love, not the ones that made me presentable, but the ones that made me feel like me. Sometimes colorful, sometimes soft and worn, always mine. I filled my space with things that made my heart breathe easier. Plants, handwritten notes, books that didn't need to impress anyone. And most of all, I allowed myself to be unrushed. No one hurrying me to the car, no one waiting impatiently at the table, no one watching how long I sat staring at a tree outside the window, a tree I had passed 1,000 times before, but only now truly saw. These may seem like small things, but when you've spent a lifetime putting everyone else's needs ahead of your own, they feel enormous, like reclaiming a language you forgot you spoke, like coming home to yourself after being away for far too long. Living alone didn't just give me space. It gave me permission. Permission to live at my own pace, to feel what I feel, to honor what brings me joy, even if no one else understands it. And in doing so, I found that joy isn't always in company. Sometimes, it's in the simple act of living without apology. So if you fear that living alone means emptiness, let me offer you another truth. It can also mean fullness, of choice, of quiet, of self. And sometimes, that is exactly what the soul has been waiting for. At first, the silence was loud. I remember walking through my home in the early evenings. No television on, no footsteps in the hallway, no one asking, "What's for dinner?" And the quiet was so complete, it almost felt like a presence of its own. I thought, maybe I should invite someone over. Maybe I should join another group. Maybe I should get a pet, or a roommate, or anything to fill this space. Because we've been taught that silence means something's missing. That if your home is quiet, your life must be too. But then, something shifted. One afternoon, I sat by the window and watched the light change across the room. I didn't move. I didn't scroll or call or plan. I just watched. And something stirred in me. Not boredom, but presence. It was like meeting a part of myself I hadn't heard from in years. The part that notices the texture of sunlight, the smell of rain on pavement, the way tea tastes different when you actually pay attention. I realized I didn't need people to fill the space. I needed aliveness. So I began inviting my own soul back into the room. I bought a small journal, not to track tasks, but to capture thoughts. I planted herbs in tiny pots on the windowsill. I started humming again, little melodies that had no name. I read things slowly. I spoke to the air sometimes, not out of madness, but companionship. I wasn't waiting to be rescued from the quiet anymore. I was inhabiting it. And in doing so, I found that emptiness is not always a void. Sometimes it's a canvas. And you, just as you are, with your breath, your awareness, your gentle rituals, are more than enough to fill it. Living alone after 65 taught me something I never expected. The space you fear might be empty is actually where your true self has been waiting. Not lonely, not lost, but alive. Just beneath the noise. People often assume that living alone means living in danger. They say it gently, of course, with concern in their eyes and softness in their voice. But aren't you afraid something might happen? And truthfully, sometimes I am. I'm not reckless. I know that age comes with realities. Bones are more fragile, reflexes are slower, help doesn't come instantly when no one else is in the next room. But I've come to understand something important. Safety isn't only about who is nearby. It's about how you prepare, how you live, and how well you know yourself. So yes, I've made adjustments. I keep my phone close and fully charged. I check in with someone every day, even with a simple good morning text. I installed lights in every hallway. I have a medical alert button just in case. And I've learned to listen to my body, to rest when it says rest, to sit when I feel unsteady, to ask for help when something feels off. These things don't make me weak. They make me wise. I may live alone, but I am not isolated. I've built a quiet web of care, not with constant supervision, but with intention. And more importantly, I trust myself. I trust that I've learned enough, seen enough, and felt enough to know when something isn't right. I also trust the people in my life, the ones who check in not out of duty, but love. Even if they're not in the next room, their presence surrounds me in other ways. There's safety in that. There's strength in knowing that even in solitude, you are held by something larger than just your walls. And let's not forget this. There are many who live with others and still feel unseen, still feel unsafe, still feel alone. Safety isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It's the peace that comes from knowing you're enough, that your life, lived in your own way, can still be protected, honored, and whole. Living alone doesn't mean I'm without care. It means I've chosen to care, differently, deliberately, and with quiet power. There's a quiet pain that many elders carry. They don't talk about it much, but you can see it in their silence, in the way they shuffle a little more softly, in how they hesitate before asking for something. It's the fear of being a burden. I've felt it too, that subtle pressure when living in someone else's home, even when they love you. Even when they say, stay as long as you want. You start watching the clock when you shower. You wonder if your footsteps are too loud. You ask permission before turning on the kettle. You start shrinking. Not because they made you feel small, but because you're afraid of taking up space. And over time, that fear turns into guilt, and guilt turns into quiet sorrow. And sorrow makes you forget that you still deserve joy. That's why for me, living alone has been one of the greatest gifts I've ever given myself. Not because I don't love my children, not because I want distance from others, but because I needed to remember what it feels like to exist without apology. In my own home, I don't worry if I'm in the way. I don't feel like I'm asking for too much. I don't feel the ache of wondering if I'm a guest who's stayed too long. I feel whole. I can make noise. I can sit in silence. I can move at my own rhythm, eat when I want, rest when I choose, and simply be myself. I know that not everyone has this option, and I don't take it for granted. But I also know this. There is a different kind of health that comes from not feeling like a guest in your own life, a kind of peace that blankets you when you don't have to ask for permission just to exist. So yes, I may be alone, but I am not surrounded by the unspoken weight of being someone's responsibility. I am surrounded by freedom. And in that freedom, I have found dignity. And in that dignity, I have found peace. So, is living alone after 65 a danger, or is it a kind of freedom? The honest answer is, it depends. Not just on your health or your finances or the size of your home. It depends on one thing more than anything else: how you live with yourself. Because solitude by itself is neutral. It doesn't hurt you, it doesn't heal you, it simply reveals you. If you enter it afraid, it may feel like a cage. But if you enter it open, with softness, with preparation, with intention, it becomes a sacred place. A space where no one tells you who to be. A space where you don't shrink to fit inside someone else's life. A space where your memories echo, not haunt. Where your routines reflect you, not someone else's rhythm. I'm not here to tell you everyone should live alone. There are beautiful lives lived in multi-generational homes, in close-knit communities, with caretakers and loved ones near. But I am here to say this: if you are living alone, or thinking of doing so, don't be ashamed. Don't let the fear win. Don't believe the lie that solitude means sorrow. Because sometimes living alone isn't the beginning of decline, it's the beginning of coming home. Coming home to your own pace, to your quiet preferences, to your slow mornings and soft evenings, to yourself, without permission, without apology. And if you've ever been told it's too risky, just smile. Because what they call risky, you might one day call peace. If this video touched something in your heart, if it helped you see your own life in a new light, leave a comment below. Tell me what scares you or what frees you about being alone after 65. You never know who might read your words and whisper, "Me too." And if you're still figuring it out, still building this quiet, beautiful life in your own time, then stay with us. Subscribe to Golden Pathways, because here, you don't have to figure it out alone. You are seen, you are strong, and you are never too old to live in a way that feels completely, gently yours.